When you feel ready, settling yourself into a comfortable seated posture. Your shoulders are released so that your shoulder blades slide down your back. Your chest is soft. Crown of your head is released upward. The weight rests just in front of those sitting bones. Your legs are soft. Letting go of your mind. With each exhalation, allow your whole body to soften. With each inhalation, that sense of great stillness and peace. Softening into the present moment. Practicing simply being here now. You're not trying to do anything or be anyone or go anywhere. Practice letting yourself simply be. Only a couple more minutes, allowing your whole body to soften, your mind to let go of whatever it was doing earlier in the day, simply settling into the present moment. And as we continue to practice, maintain this level of settled stillness. Simply being here, not trying to do anything, not pushing your mind. Don't start turning this into a task for yourself of self-improvement. Simply be quiet and present, gentle, doing the practice, and then that's enough. This is a way to practice just being here. So even when you're at work, no matter what you're doing, you're practicing simply being present, using the work as a way to practice that soft presence. When you're driving, use the driving experience as a meditation, as a way to practice being present, quieting the mind, softening the body, letting go of expectations, letting go of the breath. So you can cultivate those skills here and then take them and then practice them in your daily life. And things get easier and easier, better and better. Hi, Del. Mr. Del, we appreciate you. Remember to soften your shoulder as your elbow comes up. The movement of the shoulder goes back as the elbow goes up rather than forward, backward and down. Not because you pull it toward the spine, but because you release the shoulder blade down. Maintain that deep stillness that we cultivated through the sitting. Your awareness soaking in, allowing your mind and your body and your breath, all of these qualities to merge together into one practice. Releasing all around the eyes. And as usual, allow me to welcome all of the people in the background who I do not know and who do not know me. Please do check down below the video for a link to an introductory lesson for this particular Qigong massage set. That will let you know what we're doing, how, and why. And so that when you join us in these live warmth soaking in around the eyes, remember to always let go of your arms. If you find yourself accumulating tension, just pause, wait for it to release, and then continue, so you don't slowly build tension throughout the practice. Pouring your awareness into that layer between the skin and the bone. Feeling into it, allowing the body to access that space, to allow qi to flow and gather. Qi moves where your intent and your awareness leads. Remember that the finger that moves behind your ear can soften these points at the base of the ear around this bony prominence that connects to the neck and throat. When you plug that in, will you plug it in just out there in the hall?
Oh, yeah.
I know that for many of you, it's uncomfortable to circle your face for too long, either because your skin is sensitive, maybe your hands are oily, or you have carpenter and sword user calluses on your hands. And so as you move your hands over your face, sometimes that can get uncomfortable to do it so many times. And so instead, as you do the 36 or however many that you choose to do in both directions, you can bring chi and warmth to your hands and then hover your hands just above your face as you make these circles, just close enough so that you feel the warmth and perhaps pressure from the movement of your hands over your face in both directions. And allow your awareness to continue to soak into that layer beneath the skin on top of the musculature. And that's also a healing practice. Just make sure that always at the end you sink the chi down when you're done. Especially after spending so much time working on the space in the upper body, we want to definitely take enough time to settle deeply here. If you ever do work, especially in your head, always settle. Let everything come down. Qi stuck in your head and upper body is not good for you. It causes all kinds of strange symptoms. Fevers, agitation, headaches, racing thoughts, delusions, all kinds of things. We want to allow things to settle. I've read too many teachers who are teaching practices that cause these sorts of strange side effects. And in order to make themselves feel okay about it, they say, oh, those are just symptoms of healing, symptoms of awakening. No. Becoming super agitated and I can't sleep. That just must be you waking up. No, that's pretty funny. Yeah, Del, I'm glad that you've been getting better. Just this simple setting. Usually the best practice, the easiest one to learn is this closing movement where you open your body so that everything is free and open and lengthened. And then you allow everything to gather and sink down through your body to the level of the navel. At least as far as an easy practice, that's a good one to learn. We try to put it in between just about every separate exercise that we do in most Qigong sets. But the better you can get at anchoring your awareness down here, you can even study while your awareness is here, so Qi is constantly returning. So that rather than being pulled up into the head, it sinks down. And that's a very important thing. Yeah, Del's really good at getting people to like the videos. Without Del, I would have no thumbs up.
Yeah, it's so thoughtful.
It's really kind.
Like, thank you so much for caring.
We do appreciate you. Because this is what I want to do. I want to be able to teach and spread these things. And the more people help me with the algorithm like you, the more I'm able to do it. And so I really appreciate it. Because it's so awkward to ask people to do stuff for you, you know? Please, may I have one more like? I'll tell people to go home, just turn on my videos and then walk away. So I get hours. Pretty funny. One thing worth mentioning about this sinking the Qi, especially if we're really good at thinking all the time, is that one mistake that people make is they try to push their mind into their dantian or into some part of their body. They try to think about their feet. They try to place their mind at their feet. But what that does is it pulls Qi up to their head where they're pushing from. And so if people are pushing hard, trying to get their Qi down by thinking hard about their feet, and I'm thinking about this place, and I'm trying to put my mind in places, all that does is draw Qi up to the head because it's an efforting, it's a clenching. And it's a big mistake that people make. You don't want to force things to go places. You want to allow your mind to settle, to sink, to condense. And so when you let go of trying to push things around, it's almost like, because your mind is part of your body, It's like your awareness has a weight of its own. And when you let it go, it just naturally goes. That's why that metaphor about dust settling in water is so apt, because that's what happens when you stop trying to do stuff. It just naturally goes, which of course is easier said than done, to stop trying to do stuff. But it's just like that sitting that we do in the beginning, where we're simply just letting ourselves be here. We're not trying to do things. The more we try to do stuff and we grip and clench our mind, the more our chi comes up and we suffer the side effects. And so this very first skill, and it's the reason why I'm talking about it so much in my Snake and Turtle series, is because I want to teach more advanced methods, but they're all based upon the ability to let your mind sink and your chi to flow because we let go, the breath to flow because we get out of the way, rather than doing stuff. Because otherwise, the practices turn toxic and people get hurt. And so we have to be careful. I think it's the medicine of the future, too. Allowing everything to release. You take your time, soften anywhere, spending an extra time, any space that feels as though it requires a little extra release. If your shoulders are tight, remember you can put your hand beneath your elbow and help yourself release that area. And as well, if you have a lot of breast tissue that's sensitive, this may be uncomfortable, so you can always do this with the same side arm so that you're releasing there. Simply making certain that you're not trying to push into the musculature, not for this particular set. Instead, let your awareness soak into it, the space just on top. That wraps and connects to the spine, into the bone structure that penetrates into those spaces in between everything. Easing open these points, you might find that this area, which is so chronically tight on 90% of the people I've treated, is starting to soften and open. And not because we're trying to press into the musculature, but we're relieving the space around it. And remember, when something wants to be able to let go, there has to be space around it to release into. And so by softening these spaces that encompass the musculature, there's space for it to release, to expand, to move through, increasing circulation, increasing the sense of awareness around this area. All of this is healing. Today we are going to chat a bit about another of the 8 extraordinary vessels. The next 4 are a bit more difficult to understand for most people. They're something you have to feel your way into, rather than simply trace a path and notice how it relates. But the primary point for connecting with this yin linking vessel, yin wei mai, is this pericardium 6 point again, the inner gate, nei guan. Softening the back and the front. It's useful to connect at the same time, but perhaps spend an extra moment relating here. Allow your hands to become softer and softer throughout this set. Notice the change as though they become cotton, completely released, not floppy. They're still full as the movement reaches through and connects to the points, but not gripped, easy. It's a pretty comfortable looking stool you have there.
Very comfortable.
Remember that as you release these areas, beneath the arm, on top of the shoulder, front of the shoulder, these are all connections to this one movement quality. And that if you find that your shoulders are gripped and pulled forward and down, then part of what you want to release is this area and through here. And so find those spaces that are gripping and held tight, as though with cords of steel, and start to soften them open, not by using force, but by coaxing them gently. If you find that your shoulder is constantly pulled up, then you want to release it from the top. by slowly coaxing open these spaces. Keep your hands soft, your opposite shoulder released. Softening all the way around. Again, maybe paying special attention to that space behind the elbow, that for so many people is deficient and weak and grips and has fascial damage from overuse. Softening all the way around the elbow. And these main points here are the ones that I'm emphasizing just for this particular set. But just as a reminder, if you have other spaces that are damaged or gripping for no reason, please do spend time as well, helping to ease that membrane layer. Deeply softening this tissue. Remember that the release sequence within the body. First, we quiet the mind. We settle the awareness so that it can guide the qi. We then nourish and build up the qi. We restore our resources. We learn to rest. We learn to eat. So our channels actually have something in them. And then we begin to interact with that qi through awareness. We use that to soften this layer, what we're calling the fascia, those empty spaces. And then we use that to overflow, and then we begin to heal and transform the musculature, the sinews. Eventually it overflows into the bones and refills. Slowly our body heals, gently opening. But we start with this soft, quiet awareness. Otherwise, anything that we do tightens and pulls away and takes us in a different training direction for our body. The inner and the outer gate. Spending a bit of extra time here on this inner gate point, just between those two tendons in the cave that you feel there, allowing your awareness to soak into this point. There's a lot of very common damage here to this tissue. So you want to allow this to unravel and to release. For some reason today, the side of my hand feels best. Most easy way to release that area. It's funny how it's so different all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea why it changes. That's a little weird. I've seen people do that. Easing open. So today, again, we are talking about the yin way, this connecting point. It's like a bridge, a linking thing, like the crossing point of two roads. A space that draws things together. If you tie things up, you link it. And what this extraordinary vessel does, remember, it's not a channel. It doesn't flow in the way that we think of it. It's part of how our bodies are organized, how they are structured. Rather than a doing function, it's a being function. It's a part of our deeper nature. So don't try to translate them as channels. That can become confusing. And as we are forming, initially, that part of us that divides and begins to turn into the yin and the yang channels on the body, the aspect of it that links all of that yin energy in the body together, that is the channel flow of that quality, is this yin linking vessel. And so as we've worked on the back of the body, the face, the head, this kind of thing, there's this interesting quality that the yin channels move, or they interact with the body in a certain way. Most of the areas in the body that are very fragile and delicate are the yin side. The yang side, you are more likely to want to take a smack to if you had to. And so the yang channels are here, for instance. Yin channels are here. But then that quality begins to change so that the backs of the hands are the yin side, even though the channels are still there. And the palms tend to turn yang. And it's like that elsewhere. But along our back of our head, all of this is this yang channel space. This is the yin channels. Yang channels are along the front. Along the back. The yin channels are along the front. The inside lines are yin. This is the yang. And so as you experience your body, the part of the experiential component, like that's what you want to keep warm and protected, these are usually the part of the yin channels. And so part of what the yin linking vessel is the quality of that throughout the body. And so it's very difficult to describe. But the next four vessels, we tend to think about them and work with them along a particular line of the body. But really, it's something that is divided and through our whole system. As we were forming, it's an entire part of that formation process that turned into something that works through our whole body and our mind. And so it's more difficult to describe. I can't point to it as easily as yesterday's belt vessel. But its global impact in your body can be experienced. And we want to begin to learn how to connect with that quality. And so simply by experiencing in your own physical body this sense of the inside feeling kind of delicate, needing to be kept warm differently than the yang side. And as you learn about Chinese medicine, the qualities of the yin channels versus the yang channels. So here, I sweep up the yang side. Hey, Anna, nice to have you here. I relax down the yin side. Up the yang, down the yin. Notice the quality of touch to the space can feel different. Its requirements are different. How it interacts with your body is different. I don't want to give you a bunch of intellectual discussions about how these things function. I want you to find how they are inside your body. Again, part of the reason for this practice is to learn to listen. That's one of its functions. Mel made me Earl Grey tea. So, as we were working through the 8 extraordinary vessels the past 4 days, we started with that chongmai, that surging, that penetrating vessel that runs in this system through the very center of the body. If you look at the acupuncture charts, it runs through the center of the spinal cord, but that's more about accessibility and a different understanding. Here we want to feel inside our body that relationship that runs directly through the middle, and it's associated with the unchanging, the still quality, that deep sense of fullness. And part of its function in our body as we release, as we allow it to be full, is this quality of being held upright in a seated position, because we're exploring it in this seated position. And we allow that quality to be present. And again, still, its function, its nature, its quality, its taste is this gentle, open emptiness that's full. The language gets very strange when talking about the undifferentiated, but we want to find that quality in our body and allow it to be present. And then as that support line finds its way through, and it will eventually, that allows our spine to be free, so that our spine becomes empty of force, flexible, gentle, warm. It allows for things to move up and down it because you're not compacting on your spine. You're being held up instead by this chi quality, for lack of a better term, that runs through the center line. And as your spine is free and all of this is lengthened upward, then that allows your chest to be empty, your belly to be soft. And as all of this releases, there's a gentle sinking down, not just along the front, but through the center of the body into this dantian space. So these are 3 primary vessels that in a way help to define not just the center line and the whole quality of the body, but the front and the back in relationship to each other, how these aspects of the body function, because the body keeps differentiating and changing as we grow. And one of the ways that we differentiate is front and back. They function differently, they feel differently, as we were just exploring with the yin and the yang channels. And as we have this releasing and lightness upward because things are being restored, one of the ways that we release is this: that which goes up, that which sinks down, the differentiation between the sky and the earth. And that's this belt vessel around the waist. That becomes free and soft. And part of its function then becomes this ability to turn physically in the way that a free spine has its own capacity to do things. But as a quiet quality during our practice here, there's just this natural spaciousness that opens and is free here. So one of its functions is to unite, but also to allow for that natural rising and sinking, the separation. Once these first 3 are stabilized and full. And again, we're not trying to move chi. As I was saying earlier, if you try to sink your energy or to move things, all that does is push chi into your head, which is what you're gripping that chi with. We want to allow our energy and our intent to sink, our mind to become quiet and effortless, so that awareness settles like a stone through water. Otherwise, if we're pushing with our mind all the time, all it does is constantly draw chi up and we become more stuck. I can't say that enough. And so you're experiencing how your body is differentiating itself. Again, not in terms of like a functional flow of things that we're doing to ourselves, but how we grew, how we are at a deeper level, how our channels came about. Where did they flow from? What are these reservoirs of water? If we're going to use this water flow municipal plumbing example, And so if you can find that difference in quality between the yin channels, physically, just externally with the skin, which is the easiest way for most of us to experience in the beginning, we're kind of like, oh, sensitive, less sensitive. Sensitive, less sensitive. Sensitive, less sensitive. You can also learn to differentiate and understand the different styles of nourishment that these channels provide based on the connections they have deeper inside. But for the sake of this class, that's a very difficult thing to do since we're working on this very superficial layer. But this yin linking vessel, in the books, usually you'll find it described as something that travels down the sides of the body, because we've been working on the midline and this line, but there's also the quality of something that divides us in a way front to back, inside and outside, inside here, outside here, inside here, outside here. But it also connects left and right, inside here, outside here. And the quality of that connection runs through, is generated by, is conceptually held in this idea of the yin wei, the yin linking vessel. Yin wei mai. And so let's go ahead and continue forward. And we will spend some extra time working on the outside of the body here. But really, what you want to do is instead notice the shape of these connections. What is it that connects you left to right, that is strengthened as you heal those interconnections across the body? What is it that relates the inner surfaces of the body all around the body and differentiates them from the outer surfaces? These are things that you can feel. Clinically, we use all of these channels for something different. Oh, this person has a certain kind of headache or a certain kind of fever symptom, or they walk or move in a certain way. But those are symptoms of larger weaknesses. And so often the clinical use of the channels is very functional. But here we're thinking more in terms of theory of Chinese medicine and how we relate to the body in a different way. So as we soften here along the side, take extra time to relate to and release and connect with that quality in the body. Maybe you notice as the bottom side, the sensitive yin side of your arm connects with your shirt. How does that feel? How would it be different if you were using the other side of your arm? It doesn't just end on that one part of the arm. It travels all throughout your body. What is that like? Why is it like that? If you were curled up in a ball like a fetus, which channels would be on the inside? Which ones would be on the outside? Letting your chi settle. Letting your mind sink down through your body like a stone through water rather than pushing your mind down, which only sends your chi up. There's a wonderful description, one of the ideas around how these deeper vessels form rather than flowing channels, because we've been talking about the 8 extraordinary vessels, that if you were to have this single egg and this little organism begins to divide, turning into, what is it, the blastocyst or whatever we call that, these different phases of growth into a human, or maybe into any creature. There's this functional thing, and then this space opens up in the middle. It goes, and that's this penetrating vessel. And then it goes and divides. Now we have 2. And this is the ren and the du. And then maybe it divides again, maybe this way. It goes and pulls apart that way. And these are the yin wei, yang wei, yin chao, yang chao, which we'll talk about tomorrow. And then it divides again that way, and that's the belt vessel that runs through. And so these are the fundamental dividing lines of how we shaped ourselves as people. They started that early. And these various qualities, again, they're so deep that they're not really parts of our daily interaction. They're more about what shapes us to be able to act daily, which is why we don't want to try to think of them like channels. And so this quality of feeling how your body relates to itself in a primordial way, not a special woo-woo way or anything strange. You're simply connecting with how you are. And these are ways to conceptualize that process and to understand yourself more fully, which is, of course, always the goal. And that's what brings the healing. Does that make sense?
This is really neat. Yeah. I never heard that before.
Yeah. It's
and I appreciate your sound effects.
Everything is better with sound effects.
Mm-hmm.
Notice how my shoulders don't roll forward or pull back. Instead, they stay centered and my shoulder blades soften up and down. My neck is comfortable. My back is straight. My hips are released. My breath is soft. Everything is easy. And again, as we begin to work on the sides of the body, just for the sake of the discussion around this yin wei line, which is mostly talked about as something that runs along the sides of the body. If I was to stand sideways and you were to slice me in half in some nonviolent way, bisect me this way, more or less you'd be getting a sense of these channels. But again, it's not so much that they just follow those lines. And it's funny because even in the major textbooks, Machiocha, Deadman, and these various instructors, they have the channels in different places, depending on which tradition and who's talking about it. And that's with professional Chinese medical doctors. And so within the Qigong systems, we think about them more experientially. How do our bodies function? And we begin to release these areas. So allow this sense of relationship through. And somewhere there's a line in here where you experience this shift from yang into yin, where the feel of the tissues changes, the function of the body changes, the direction of movement during standing posture, for instance. And you want to feel where that line is. And so you can feel this part of your body and you can ask yourself, is this a yang or a yin function, like experience? And then the same here. Somewhere along here as I move across, and I don't want to try to tell you what to feel or think, somewhere in here there's a shift from yang to yin. The quality is different. Can you notice that? What is that like? There isn't a right answer here. There's your experience and how your system works. And you can begin to notice how if you are being present and loving, the quality of your touch changes between here and here. What you're looking to feel is different. What is that like? And that difference is embodied within our system. In part, that the yin aspect of this is embodied within this yin linking vessel. That's what it's linking all of those qualities together. It's very cool. So as you feel these areas of difference, find within yourself where that line is. Where does the yin linking vessel line run? Feel it for yourself. Appreciate my star socks.
I do. Do you appreciate my llama socks?
I was just noticing them.
Llamas and cactus and snowflakes. Very creative combination.
We're very boring people here, but our socks are fantastic. So notice here as you work on the back of the leg, the line here that changes from yang into yin. How does the quality of your touch change? How does the quality of your intention shift? What are the tissues like? Do they go from being strong on one side to weak on the other because you've been focusing on creating energetic changes only on one part of your body? What is that like? How would you fill the weak side and soften the extra strong side? Because remember, real strength can only occur in balance. Otherwise, it just ends up being a destruction to itself. How would you balance your yin and your yang? There's a couple points down here on the ankle and foot that relate to this yin linking vessel, which again, in the books is on one location, but really it's an experience that you have throughout your whole body. One of the qualities that it has is that when the yin channels are excessive for various reasons, maybe you have certain kinds of fevers or issues, that it overflows and it takes it into those reservoirs. Sometimes it can take sickness there as well, and we have to deal with it later. And one of the ways that we access that point, if we move to this spleen 6 point that we work on every day, if you just go a little bit toward the Achilles and up a bit, there's often a tender location there, this kidney 9 point. And that's one of the spaces within which we work to access and harmonize this yin linking quality throughout the body. The most important point is that inner gate point that we were talking about earlier. But this is another one. So as you soften that point, you can connect to this quality here of yin throughout the body. And as well, a point that we've worked with before is this spleen 4 point here, which is just along this line of the foot, just up from the inside of the arch, basically. And if you soften into that area while we do this normal practice, again, you can connect to that sense of yin and yang on the body, how they relate, what it means. Are there areas of generalized weakness or strength, different kinds of strength and fullness, warmth and coolness? How do we harmonize and balance these qualities in our body? Tomorrow we will work on the yang way, the yang linking, which is the same, just the other half of that same experience. The other half of that pivot. Softening in through here. So as we talk about balancing yin and yang, one of the common discussion points is whether or not we can hyper strengthen one part of those two and not the other. So can I just strengthen the yang parts of my body without strengthening the yin parts? What would that do? What kind of imbalance does that create, and what are the results of that? And that's one way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it is people love to inhale. What if I only inhaled? What if I exhaled only 30% of everything I inhaled? What if I only exhaled 99.9% of everything I inhaled?
You might be a very anxious person. Like me.
Eventually it would kill you.
I noticed that's what happens when I'm really nervous. Like yesterday I was giving a presentation and my coworker and I were talking about how difficult it was for us to exhale. We felt like we were running up a hill the entire time.
That's right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but like I assume that's because there's so much tension in the chest. And so I'm not able to breathe from the belly in those moments.
Well, we grip here, and so we can only go.
Exactly.
But we can't let go, because letting go is part of relaxation. So we only fill and fill and fill.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in those moments, it actually feels scary to let go.
That's right. It's really interesting.
It is interesting. Even though by letting go, you're probably much safer and clearer minded and
That's right.
better equipped to do whatever you're doing.
That's right. Yeah. That's the same thing with everything, that if we, so we expend a certain number of calories every day, but we take in 1% less than we expend. How long can that last? Or if we just take in 1% more, what happens over time? I'm just thinking of every kind of normal yin and yang expenditure we have in the body. And one of the ways that happens is if I tighten more than I soften. What happens to the body over time? If I tighten only 1% more than I ever soften, it still pushes you in a really strong direction over the course of a life. And how many people do you know that have taken the time to become good at letting go? So I talk to people all the time that cannot let go of the most basic kinds of tension. It just accumulates and accumulates and accumulates until they collapse and are overwhelmed, or something breaks. And then maybe that part goes numb and it releases in some way, but then they regain function and it accumulates and it accumulates. You can look at this in any way that you want. We are built on balance. We survive through balance. And we are destroyed by imbalance. And you can observe it in your body in this yin and yang channel discussion. But we have questions about can we do certain kinds of exercises and strengthening, for instance. You certainly can, as long as you are as good at letting the tension go as you are at building it up. As long as you are as good at healing damaged tissue as you are at damaging the tissue. At least as good. Hopefully better. Noticing this relationship as you circulate down the yang, up the yin. How does that feel? As you lengthen the yang here, because we're lengthening this way, what does that mean? Can you lengthen all the way to the top of your head, out to your feet? Not because you push and pull on things, but because you're letting go. Make sure that you wake up your feet, your ankles, your knees, your hips. Even your lower back is softening open and rounding as you do this. This is lengthening. Don't collapse down onto the inside of the body. Softening the waist, just like we worked on yesterday. Maintaining that sense of length that we're cultivating through these extraordinary vessels. We had some questions about what's often called pre-heaven and post-heaven, Tian, Huotian methods. And these practices with the 8 extraordinary vessels, it's more along the lines of the pre-heaven. We're working with that quality that happened before we were born. It's a different kind of method. We're not doing something, we're allowing an influence to be reestablished. And in most of our practices, we do mixtures of both. If you'd like to lay down, simply give yourself a couple of moments settling. Remember that if you'd like to put something beneath your knees or beneath your head, that's perfectly okay. At some point, when you're ready, feel free to return to a seated posture. Unless you'd like to take a nap or just fall asleep, that's okay too. Pausing for just a moment to allow your awareness to settle into the navel. And slowly letting your awareness expand to include your whole body and the space around you. Thank you very much. Mel's in the background here.
Let's see what questions we have today.
I tried to answer most of them during the class as best I could.
Del says you were very swagged out today.
Thanks, Del.
Okay, let's see. Is it possible one could apply the principles of Wu Wei, posture and alignment, softness, etc., in doing such simple exercises as a means to keep the natural integrity of the tissues?
I think so. I think that you can apply these methods to anything as long as you're following that balance that I'm mentioning. Like you asked about push-ups and pull-ups and things, and these are wonderful exercises. Maybe don't put them right after your practice or just before, because what you're trying to communicate with your tissues might be different. So give yourself a little space so this settles into your body. But you can certainly do whatever practice you'd like. Just, again, make sure that you are softening as much as you're tightening, or ideally a little bit more, and healing a little bit more than you are damaging. The problem is that most people that do those kinds of things, they never learned how to soften. They never learned how to quiet their mind. They never learned how to heal or nourish. And so remember that there's a big difference between health and fitness, and they don't often overlap. They can, but you have to make certain that you are allowing that healing process to be part of the fitness process, if that's what you're pursuing.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning the push-ups and pull-ups. That was actually the context around that question. I forgot to read it. And then the other one was, would these exercises prohibit one from transforming the tissues and fascia of the body?
Only I think if they're, well, a lot of people say that there are certain things you cannot cultivate at the same time. Like for instance, people that do tons of abdominal exercises very often find it impossible to then soften their dantian. These kinds of things, because we're traumatizing an area, especially the way we exercise in isolation. And so, yeah, a lot of these various experts and masters that I talk to or listen to, they would say that you can't really cultivate both at the same time until you get to a high enough level at one that it's just in your body. And now the way you go to the gym or play lacrosse or whatever it is that you do, it inherently expresses that function of that internal skill. And so it just depends on who you ask, I think.
And Anna says, I'm very interested in the 8 extraordinary vessels I've been studying in shiatsu.
Oh, great. Yeah. The extraordinary vessels are wonderful. And as a therapist, as a treatment practitioner, you may engage with them differently, because you may say, oh, I have this particular kind of deficiency headache. Or you work with the chongmai based on certain kinds of trauma or menstrual flow aspects, things like that. And that is a perfectly legitimate way to interact with anything in the body. And often that medical theory is sort of an outgrowth of the minutia around it. Oh, it connects to this point, therefore we use it because it's useful at this point, that kind of thing. But for the study of Qigong, we want to understand more how it impacts us, the shape of our mind, how we move overall, that kind of thing. And so sometimes they sound a little different, like how the penetrating vessel we usually function with it in the center of the body rather than through the spine itself. And so sometimes the learning may conflict, but it's only because of the conceptual framework that we're working in is slightly different. But it is powerful work. It's really fun.
I don't see any other questions at the moment, but you have 7 likes.
Oh my gosh.
Del.
Thanks
I think
to
that's
Del.
the most I've seen.
Yeah. Thank
That's
you,
really
Del.
nice.
You are the king.
Thank you to the 7 people who liked it.
Yeah. Who, we don't know who they are, but they're here. We see people, the numbers show up, the statistics will tell me how many people will come. And we'll get like dozens and dozens of people sometimes, over 30 people, even though only one person maybe shows up in the chat. And so I don't know who these people are, but I'm happy they come. I hope they're learning. I don't know if it's the same 30 every time or completely different people. Who knows? And they come from all over the world, which is pretty interesting. And so I'm very happy to have you with us. Whoever you are, distant stranger, we are connected through Qigong. Wonderful. Looks like that's all. Thank you, everybody.